Hi there, Julia. So if you want to go ahead and share your screen. So just bringing in our next speaker for the session, we have Julia Whelan. Julia is from the University College London, and she will be giving a talk entitled Communication in Party Travel Initiation, an Analysis of Travel-Associated Behaviors in Chimpanzees. So Julia, you have the floor.
Great, thank you. Yeah, hi, I'm Julia Whelan. Today I'll be presenting some of my research that I did for my master's dissertation. And this, I'm looking forward to presenting today. So inherent in any social animal is the need to remain in a group. However, many species will need to travel once, if not more times a day for food, water, to find shelter, etc. And on top of this, a lot of individuals will want to do this at different points throughout the day due to differing energy level, hunger level, thirst level. You get the idea. So the main question is how to remain in a group. Now, chimpanzees are one of these species that are faced with these issues. They live in a fission fusion society, so that means that within one community, there will be multiple different parties that shift throughout the day. So individuals may leave or come back and rejoin the party. Parties may split into new parties or merge. What I wanted to look at in this research was how do wild chimpanzees initiate party travel? Now, the main method that a lot of species use to initiate party travel are pre-departure behaviors. This is a behavior that's performed before the initiator initiates travel. An initiator is exactly what it sounds like. This is the individual that takes that first step away and leads the group. This pre-departure behaviors can be beneficial in helping to predict the timing of departure. And in some cases, they can even indicate which direction the initiator wants to travel in. Pre-departure behaviors have been observed in a lot of primate species, including homidrous baboons, and some of the chimpanzees' closest relatives, the bonobos. So I wanted to narrow it down to look at a few travel-associated behaviors in chimpanzees to see if they are using any pre-departure behaviors. And the one I will focus on today is the who vocalization. So the who vocalization has been observed in multiple different chimpanzee communities. It's relatively quiet for chimpanzees anyway. It's audible only up to 150 meters away. And it has three acoustically distinct variations. So there's the rest who, which is often done in context of rest, as the name suggests. There is the alert who, which is usually used when one individual is trying to alert others to a potential threat, such as a snake. And then there's the one that we will be focusing on today, which is the travel who. Now, the travel who has been observed to be used as a pre-departure behavior in other chimpanzee communities, such as in this paper here. And not only has it been used as a pre-departure behavior, but it actually improves the success of recruitment. So what that means is the initiators that used this vocal behavior, the travel who, were more successful in recruiting one or more individuals to join them on party travel. So this will be important later, so just keep this in mind. So a bit about my study site. I did this in Isa Valley, Tanzania, in Western Tanzania. You can see on the left, we have the home ranges of the Isa community in both the wet and the dry season. And this is an interesting study site because it's a bit of a mosaic landscape. So there's a lot of miombo woodland, but In addition to that, there's a lot of evergreen forests and rocky outcroppings, so it's very varied. For my methods, I conducted hour-long focal follows on 24 individuals. So for focal follows, I would just follow and collect data on one individual at a time before then switching to the next. And I collected 2 types of data points. This was every time my focal individual produced a WHO vocalization. And the second was any type of travel event. So anytime 2 or more individuals traveled more than 10 meters, I called that a travel event. So for my initial results, I collected a total of 121 hours of focal follows. Within those hours, I observed 146 party travel events. However, I only observed and recorded 19 WHO observations, so already pretty low. So ultimately, I determined that ESA chimpanzees do not use the WHO to initiate travel. Not only was the WHO not used very frequently preceding party travel, but it also had no effect on the success of recruitment nor the speed of recruitment. So I came up with 2 possible explanations for this. The first is that there could be other pre-departure behaviors that I wasn't focused on during this field season. So I may have just been completely unaware of the other behaviors or signals that they were using to initiate party travel. The other is there may be no pre-departure behaviors used by the ESA chimpanzees at all. It may be that simply the act of standing up and walking away from the party is enough to indicate that this individual, the initiator, would like to travel. So, as you'll remember, I brought up this paper at the beginning of my talk, and I thought it was very interesting that I had such different results from this group. So this paper was done on the Sanso community of chimpanzees in Uganda, and they actually found that, like I said before, that not only was the travel WHO used as a pre-departure behavior, but it also improved success of recruitment. So comparing that to the ESA chimpanzees who barely use the WHO at all, it was a huge disparity in the use of this vocalization. So I came up with 3 possible explanations for this. The first is that it's possible the Sanso community adapted the WHO vocalization to suit their needs. So, for example, I mentioned that there are 2 other variations. It's possible that there was some sort of earlier version of the WHO vocalization, and the Sanso community adapted a new variant to serve their needs, such as the travel WHO. The second possible explanation is that the travel WHO could have been used prior in the ESA community, but as we've seen, whether it was either use of other pre-departure behaviors or no pre-departure behaviors needed, it may have vanished from the community due to, it's not necessary for successful initiation and recruitment. And third, there could be a good handful of other environmental factors that could affect the use of this vocalization, such as habitat type and proximity to neighboring chimpanzee communities. And this could be affecting whether or not the other 2 explanations are true. This could also be affecting the use of this vocalization. So, in conclusion, this disparity in the use of the vocalization is indicative of a potential cultural difference between the 2 chimpanzee communities. And it does suggest that the chimpanzees are adapting their use of signals based on their requirements and environments. Now, I will say this is very preliminary research. I would suggest that we continue research down this path because I do find it super interesting. I think there may be something here, and I think that I would love to see more research done on the WHO vocalization on both of these, the ESA and the Sanso community, as well as other chimpanzee communities. And yeah, Thank you so much. Just want to give a big shout out to my supervisor at UCL, Alex Peel, and everyone at the field site who helped me collect my data, because I would not have been able to do this without them. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Yeah, field work is definitely one of the great ways to travel and meet a bunch of new people. So just waiting for some questions to come up in the chat. One of the questions I did have is, so you mentioned that you were focal sampling. And so as you were walking around, how close were you able to get to these animals? Like, did you have to observe from afar? Did you kind of notice as you approached the group they ran away? Or what was sort of your interaction with the animals?
Sure. Yeah. So this is a relatively recently habituated community. They were only habituated roughly 2018. And I did my field season 2022. So yeah, we do have, maintain at least 6 feet of distance, and we would always wear our masks around the chimps, obviously. But yeah, so I was well within range to hear the WHO vocalization the majority of the time. Besides the times that they would, run very far and fast. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. But yeah, we wouldn't be right on top of them just for health reasons, but I definitely would expect to be able to hear the vocalization from how far I was away usually.
Okay, great, thank you. And so we already do have some questions popping up in the chat. So to start with, Ebby George, great talk. Can different populations use the same signal for different purposes? So could a travel WHO be used for something else since they still produce the vocalization?
Yeah, yeah. So this is I'm not an expert in it, and it is also, sort of an emerging field of research, especially with primates. But yeah, there is evidence that supports that there are some cultural differences in the way that different signals and communicative behaviors are used, and even non-communicative behaviors. So I think there's a very good chance that this community may use the WHO. If I were to make a guess, I would say they mostly use the rest WHO variation, because that was mainly when I heard it. But yeah, and there may be some other behavior that I didn't look at that's usually used for something else, but they may use it for pre-departure behavior, but it's hard to predict going into it.
Makes sense, yeah. So another YouTube chat question from David McCloskey, actually very similar to Ebby's question. So he said, thank you for a very interesting talk. So his question was, is there evidence of other vocalizations varying between communities? So that very similar. So I'll kind of twist it in a way where it's how big are the communities? So when Ebby and David were asking, does one community differ from the other? Is it, one community is within a tiny grouping, or would it be a whole different forest that you would consider a community?
Yeah, yeah, so at the field site I was at, there actually was a neighboring chimpanzee community that wasn't habituated, so I didn't study them, but they were within, their home range bordered with this community, so they are just kind of just right over in a different section of the forest, basically. In terms of community size, that varies pretty widely. The community I was looking at was 28 individuals at the time of the study, so relatively small, I believe. But for example, the community that was in the other paper I showed was, I believe, around 70 individuals at the time of their study. So big difference in the population size of those two communities. So Yeah, there's a lot of variation in that. But in terms of comparing these two communities specifically, they're very far apart. They're fully in two different countries. So there's a lot of room for a lot of room and time for these different communities to be separated long enough to form their own uses for these vocalizations, I should say.
And within the communities, are they all sort of related? Are they family? Are they, like what sort of makes a community socially?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's hard. We don't have a full sort of genealogy for the ISA community, but it is very common for them to be mostly related, but pretty often females will, we actually during my study there was a new female that came in, so she left her original community and joined ours in order to have join a different gene pool basically. But yeah, so there's sharing of genes, and there's a bit of back and forth between communities, but it's not super common. Their community is going to be the ones that they're most closely related to.
Makes sense. And so another question from the chat from Laura again. So hi, great presentation. When you were sampling before the 19 movements, did you hear another vocalization?
No, well, okay. So I should say I focused in on the who vocalization for just for the purposes of the talk, but I did look at a few other behaviors that have been associated with travel in the past. And so I looked at the pant hoot behavior, the pant hoot vocalization, and I also didn't find any statistically significant results for that either. But I really didn't. There wasn't anything that I went in with those four, travel associated behaviors just to have something to start with, something to look for when looking for pre-departure behaviors. But I also was trying to keep my eye out for any other, but it's so hard to predict when they're about to move. And there were some times where I honestly was convinced they were just using telepathy, because it was like they'd silently all just get up and move. So I am very open to the fact that there may have been facial expressions used, very subtle gestures, maybe very, very quiet vocalizations that, I just was not detecting or not aware of. But yeah, very hard to predict.
Yeah, great. And then just rounding off the question period with our last question from the chat from Sandeep Murmu. Can foliage density influence the use of who vocalizations in different communities?
Yeah, so this is something I was really interested in going into it, and was really hoping I'd find some interesting results for. And I did collect data on the type of foliage that we were currently in when any of these behaviors were done, or the party travel. But I didn't find anything, anything significant anyway. So I would think so, and I was really hoping I'd be able to support my ideas with this research, but ultimately I wasn't. So I can't really give you a good answer on that, unfortunately.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so that looks like it's it for the questions from the chat. So thanks again, Julia. Great talk.
Thank you.
And thank you. So we are moving into another break at the moment. So we will have a 30-minute break. So it's time to get some